So hello and welcome everybody to this great webinar for Saptarishis Astrology. Welcome Kṣaṇāti,
Namaste.
who will bring us today through this great topic. And I hope all of you are attentive listening to what he has to tell us. And if you have questions, we will sure have the time to answer questions also. And down at the bottom line is, or for some it might be also on top, is a question and answer panel. And it is very great if you could write your questions in there, because there we can find them more easily back.
Yes.
In the chat we have to scroll up and down, and it is very difficult to find the questions. So in this question and answer panel they are much more better to handle. Yeah? So Kṣaṇāti, I would say, please start with your wonderful presentation and let us understand Ketu a little bit more better.
Namaste, Inge. Thank you so much for your kindness and support always. Namaste, everyone joining us from all different parts of the world, whether it's the morning, afternoon, or evening. Namaste and welcome here to this webinar. I am so deeply honored to be a part of the Saptarishis astrology team and to share this Ketu webinar with all of you and to discuss this mystical energy, which I feel like no matter as much as we know about it, there's always something to know more. That's one of the kind of energies of Ketu, is that no matter what you know, there's always another layer. So even though we'll be talking for Ketu today for 3 or 4 hours, there's always more and more to learn and understand. And but this is a nice, I think, way of interpreting and understanding Ketu. And I welcome and thank all of you for joining me here today. And I want to give a special thanks to Sunil John, feeling his presence and feeling his energy. And I had a nice conversation with him this morning, and he's very excited for this webinar. And we're all sending him healing at this time as he, improves the quality of his life right now. So sending love and healing to Sunil from my heart. So let's get started. Let me share the webinar here. Okay, great. Can everyone see the first slide?
I can see it very well.
Okay, fantastic. And let me check the chat. Are people also seeing it?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we're going to work on how to improve our planetary karma with Ketu. And I feel that the first webinar I did was Saturn, Shani, and such a commonly misunderstood planet and labeled malefic. And, a lot of astrologers or Jyotisha, they like to focus on the benefic planets. And I think that's wonderful. But when these planets are commonly described as malefic, then people have these connotations that they're negative, that they're dark, that they aren't having a positive influence on us. And there's a complete misunderstanding. And I think one of the planetary energies that is the most misunderstood is Ketu, because it can be very malefic or challenging on the material realm, but in some of the metaphysical or spiritual realms can be particularly positive. So we're going to dive deep into the karma of Ketu, and we're going to use ancient practices, contemporary practices, Ayurvedic recommendations, and paradigms of thinking. So different ways that our consciousness will understand Ketu. And by kind of understanding Ketu this way, we can really improve our planetary relationship with Ketu in our lives. There are going to be several different topics that we're going to dive into, but the first thing that we're going to discuss or go into detail about is Ketu's karma. What is Ketu? How do we understand Ketu? And how do we understand how Ketu is going to influence our karmic paradigm or our karmic structure, our karmic journey? So this Ketu karma, how to fully understand Ketu's karma, that will be the first area. And then we'll discuss a little bit about Ketu's current transit in Aquarius. Ketu's been in Aquarius for a while right now, and we'll talk about some of the energies that are present right now in the transit for Ketu and how those energies might be influencing things. Then we'll discuss Ketu and planetary dignity, which I said many different astrologer, Jyotish, have many different opinion about the planetary dignity of Ketu. So I will be presenting this idea from a kind of integrative perspective and understanding whether Ketu is auspicious or inauspicious depending on its position. And what do we mean by Ketu auspiciousness? What do we mean by Ketu inauspiciousness? And then we'll dive into how to improve the planetary karma with Ketu from an ancient perspective, from a contemporary perspective, from an Ayurvedic perspective. And then we'll go into different examples that different members of the community have sent in that I have analyzed, and we'll dive into those questions. And then we'll take some live questions from the community, and we'll about your charts for those that are here for us for this webinar today. And so I'm really excited to dive into this topic. And first we'll be discussing what is Ketu, what is Ketu's karma, and how to understand it.
Great. Super. Just
now,
be attentive. Sorry.
Please.
Sorry to disturb. Just be attentive with your mic because we can listen this sound sometimes when it rubs, you know, at your collar.
I understand. It's helpful if I hold it, right?
But that will be a little bit, you know,
okay,
difficult.
Thank you. I'll definitely be awareness so that there's no rustling. Before we get started on the webinar, I wanted to open up with a Ketu ritual, Ketu honoring. And this Ketu honoring is a very ancient practice. And when we honor Ketu through this traditional yantra you'll see on the left, and this traditional mantra that you'll see on the right, it is said to connect us to Ketu and to help improve our planetary karma with Ketu. So I'm going to open with this traditional mantra, as well as the seed sounds, tantric mantra of Ketu. And this will kind of open the vibration so Ketu can come into the webinar today. So I'm going to open with some Om and then get into the traditional Ketu mantra. And if any of you recognize this mantra, it would be highly auspicious for you to join. But otherwise, just meditating and receiving this mantra can also be profound as well. Palas puspa sankasham taraka graha mastakam radram radratmikam goram tam Ketu pranamam yaham. Palas puspa sankasham taraka graha mastakam radram radratmikam goram tam Ketu pranamam yaham. Palas puspa shankasam taraka grahamastakam radram rajatmikam goram tam ketu pranamam yaham. Om Kram Krim Kram Saketave Namaha. 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 Om Hrim Aim Ketave 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 Namaha. Om Kram Krim Kram Saketave 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 Namaha. Hari Om Namah Shivaya. Namaste. Thank you all for sharing this Ketu mantra with me. I hope that you all enjoyed it very much.
Yes, we did. Kiran,
Okay.
which mic do you want to mute? I don't understand. Anyhow.
Is everything okay technically? I hear Venus said no audio. Is everyone's audio okay?
Audio is perfect.
Okay,
so
great.
in that sense, it must be on the particulars end. I have written to her also.
I have a feeling it's Ketu. We were just calling Ketu in, and I think Ketu is very strong, so there might be a lot of wild things happening throughout this webinar. I would not be surprised.
That is the best way to get to know Ketu.
Definitely. Okay, so let's start with analyzing Ketu's karma. So the first thing I want to discuss is how to understand Ketu and the karma that it represents. Now, I'm going to try to define this energy as simply and clearly and logically as possible. But this energy that we are going to discuss, it is not definable. So we are attempting to define something which is undefinable. So there's no way I can even get close to describing 100% of what Ketu is. But by helping understand it from a generalized perspective, from a karmic perspective, we can truly improve our karma with Ketu. In other words, we don't have to understand Ketu 100% to improve our karma with Ketu. We just have to understand Ketu at all. The first thing I want to say about Ketu is that it is the force in this universe which is radically reorganizing, transforming, and realigning our lives and our life's path so that we are in alignment with our highest potential in this lifetime. Primarily spiritual, primarily indicated with moksha, but depending on the position of Ketu, it can take away these moksha indications. So we're not going to describe it specifically that Ketu is aligning us to moksha yet. We're saying that Ketu is this force in the universe which is reorganizing, realigning, and transforming in our lives so that we are in alignment with our highest potential in this lifetime. Now, that highest potential is primarily significated spiritually, but depending on some other aspects, it can not be emphasized spiritually. So it is this reorganizing, realigning force in our lives that is constantly trying to put us on the path with our highest potential. Now, Ketu is also known as the presenter or the giver or the offerer of obstacles. And this inherent energy and nature, Ketu manifests deeply in its karmic expression. There is a reason why Ketu has been known as the presenter of obstacles for thousands of years. These obstacles which Ketu presents can also be understood or interpreted as signs, omens, or signals from a celestial realm. So, Ketu is the giver of obstacles, but depending on our consciousness, we can understand those obstacles as omens or signs or signals from a higher place. So if we're spiritually oriented, if we're on our path to our highest soul's potential, then Ketu, the obstacles that it gives us, they're more like omens, signs, signals from the universe. But when we're not in alignment with our highest potential or frequency, particularly spiritually, then we mostly understand what Ketu is giving us at obstacles. So when we change our perception and alignment with our path, those obstacles become omens. So there's two different ways of interpreting this word obstacle. Now, Ketu's karma, from a general perspective, relates to receiving these obstacles, signs, and omens and signals from the universe, which help us to align to our highest potential. So basically, Ketu is the presenter of obstacles, but that obstacle is really a gift. That obstacle is a gift that when we overcome that obstacle, when we conquer that obstacle, when we do the transformation necessary that obstacle presents, then Ketu helps align us to our highest potential. So Ketu offers these obstacles, but they are only secret gifts. So we see as obstacle, we see as problem, we see as challenge, but that is not what it is. It is a gift, it is a sign, it is an omen. And that omen is helping us align to our highest potential. Now, this potential that I'm talking about is particularly connected to the Vedic aim of life, moksha, because Ketu is considered moksha karata, moksha indicator, moksha significator, which is often considered enlightenment. That's the common word that we like to use for moksha. But it's deeply connected to surrender, non-attachment, and liberation of the ego. So even though commonly is described as enlightenment, I like to consider moksha more to be considered liberation or emancipation, the greatest form of freedom that there is.
Well said.
Now, every planet has a direction that it likes to travel, north, south, east, west, and Ketu is the only planetary force which travels upward in its direction. It is said that Ketu travels towards heaven. So every planet has a direction which it travels, and Ketu's direction is heaven, hence the moksha karaka, hence the moksha significator, because that Ketu's alignment is to a celestial realm, is to a higher place that we can't even fathom or understand, that is connected to our past lifetimes and our future lifetimes. But this energy, it's in heaven. So Ketu's directional orientation towards heaven coincides with this aspect that we're talking about, liberation or moksha. Therefore, Ketu's only concern or primary concern is our highest potential. And generally, this potential that we're talking about is deeply connected to moksha, which is liberation. And since Ketu prioritizes this alignment over other goals and potentials, it can cause heavily destructive effects on the material or the physical realm, because Ketu is connected to heaven and it's only concerned about our moksha, or primarily concerned about our moksha, primarily concerned about our liberation. And sometimes this moksha, this liberation, it is connected to letting go of this body. It is connected to letting go of this body. It is connecting to letting go of this ego. And that can be a very painful and difficult process. So this is why Ketu is commonly considered to be malefic, because I consider Ketu to be benefic, because I think as people on a spiritual path, we are seeking moksha. And if we are seeking moksha and want to use astrology to get there, I don't see how you get there without Ketu. Now, you don't need astrology to reach moksha, but if astrology is part of your path, then you must go through Ketu to get there. That is my personal opinion as an astrologer. So this can be very beneficial on a spiritual, metaphysical evolution of the soul perspective, but horribly destructive and chaotic on the physical or material realm, especially as relates to our attachments, because moksha is the letting go of all attachments. So a lot of time Ketu just takes away our attachments. And sometimes the loss of those attachments can be our husband, it can be our children, it can be our parents, it could be certain aspects that we wanted for our lives. And this can be very painful and difficult on the malefic realm. That is why we see it as an obstacle. But again, all of these things are orienting and aligning to moksha. So again, very benefic, positive energy on a spiritual level for the soul's evolution, but has its great significations for being difficult on the material realm. That is why I like to say that Ketu is both an angel and a demon. And it all depends on our relationship with Ketu, whether Ketu will show up as an angel or Ketu show up as a demon. And it is very similar with Rahu as well. Like Rahu can also be like an angel or like a demon. And we will discuss how are these different energies and how can we relate to Ketu as an angel instead of relating to it as this dark energy. So I like to say that Ketu is akin to an angel or relatable to an angel to those who are connected to their path to moksha. So to those that are already in the full alignment with their potential or path to moksha, Ketu acts like an angel. Now, we're in the Kali Yuga, so this is a very small percentage of people that are in path with their alignment to moksha. In the time of the Kali Yuga, moksha isn't even the top priority. So, but there is still this potential for Ketu to be like an angel to those that are primarily focused on their path to moksha, to their highest spiritual potential, and the plan the universe has for them. So Ketu is like an angel for those that are already in their highest alignment with their path to moksha. And this isn't an easy process, but it shows that when Ketu is strong, that this aspect of moksha being emphasized and prioritized over the other aims of life, dharma, artha, kama, can be really beneficial. So when Ketu is very strong, it is always best to favor moksha as the aim of life over the other aims of life, dharma, artha, kama. Even though Ketu can help those influences too, that during these Ketu energies, if we align to that moksha, Ketu can act like an angel. Now, Ketu is akin to a demon, or might seem demonic, or might act demonic to those who disregard their highest potential, run away from it, and ignore these obstacles, signs, omens, and signals that Ketu presents to align to our soul's potential. So when Ketu keeps giving signs and signals and obstacles to help us align to our highest potential, and we don't notice them, and we run away from this change, we run away from this transformation, we run away from this alignment to our highest potential because change is difficult. Transformation is painful sometimes. So we fight against the energy of the transformation. We refuse to see the signs and obstacles and messages that the universe will send us. Well, then Ketu will certainly act like a demon and is not afraid to even take away a human life the more we forget to notice any spiritual aspect of life. when we forget to notice any signs, any omens, any alignment with our spiritual potential, Ketu can be very destructive. It can even take away human life. So one of the ways we can understand this manifestation as the presenter of obstacles is to interpret these obstacles as omens, signs, and signals from the universe. So instead of looking at it as an obstacle, we're looking at it as an omen or a sign. And the definition is that the universe is showing you something. And if you're comfortable with it, God is showing you something through the universe. And this is an omen or sign. And this omen or sign is God's way or the universe's way of trying to get some change and transformation that is necessary in your life. Now, it is quite common to experience our obstacles that we face in life as challenges, problems, or inconveniences. So when we receive an obstacle, no matter what area of life it's in, we can often see this obstacle as a challenge, problem, or an inconvenience. But when Ketu is connected to these obstacles, they are divine omens. They are signs from God to help us align with our potential to moksha. So even though we might see it as an obstacle, challenge, problem, or convenience, it is really God trying to come into our lives and help us with our path to Him, with our, not Him, her, it, the universe, but with our path to the oneness, with the creation, with the Om. So these are, we can experience this as inconveniences, problems, difficulties, but they really are divine omens. Now, there's a great analogy that I have come up with to kind of explain what I mean by that Ketu is the giver of the omens and obstacles. Let's consider a lawyer who has reached a profound amount of success and reputation within their firm. And they have the great potential within the firm to become partner, which is the highest position of the firm. And they are very successful within the law firm. And that individual believes that that is their greatest potential. That individual believes that they are meant to be a lawyer and that they are meant to be a great lawyer and that they are meant to be the partner of their firm. That is what the ego and the self is believing in this situation. Now, the universe or God has a greater purpose for him. Let's say he is meant to be a guru or spiritual teacher, but he's a lawyer. But it's his karma and the universal will, God's will, for him to be a spiritual teacher. Then this person enters a Ketu energy or Ketu dasha, Ketu subperiod, or maybe Ketu's in their lagna, so this is always present. But Ketu will offer obstacles to help this native reach his potential as a judge or guru. But every time a omen or sign is offered, but not properly attended to, noticed, or received, they become more and more severe and destructive. So basically, the lawyer, the best way to understand this energy is to kind of present it as an analogy. So this lawyer is meant to be a spiritual teacher. He is meant to be a guru. And it's also possible that he's not meant to be a spiritual teacher. Let's say that this lawyer is meant to be a judge of the Supreme Court. Like sometimes what Ketu wants for us is not necessarily always spiritually indicated. It just shows that there is a higher purpose. And this person who thinks they've already reached their higher purpose, but has not reached their higher purpose, and that higher purpose is awaiting for them. And they have to go through this great change in order to get to that higher purpose. And while it's often significated spiritually, that sometimes it's significated in other ways. That's why I say that it's possible this person's potential is connected to being a spiritual teacher, but it's also possible that this person's potential could be a judge of the Supreme Court of the country. So anyway, both of these things are higher potentials. One is spiritual, one is not. This person enters their Ketu Mahadasha. They're driving to work one day and they're on their way to work and everything is going great and they just entered their Ketu Mahadasha and this person has no idea of astrology. And the tire pops on their way to work. The tire pops. And they have to pull over on the side of the road. And it takes a couple hours, maybe 90 minutes to fix the tire. And then the person gets to work and they tell their boss that they were late. And the boss says, well, there's nothing you could do. The tire popped. That's unpredictable. And it wasn't your fault. So don't worry about it. And sorry that happened. He's still in his Ketu Mahadasha. Now, I will say now, I'll give the audience a hint and tell you that Ketu popped the tire. Ketu popped the tire, but that was more like a wink. This is the first omen or obstacle that Ketu presented, was that he couldn't get to work that day. Now, let's say it takes 1 week later. Now, this time the person is driving to work and all of a sudden the transmission in the car begins to dysfunction and the transmission in the car is no longer working. And they start to panic and they quickly get off of the highway. And just before they get off of the highway in the emergency lane, a car almost hits them. But they manage to get away from the highway and get off to the side of the road, and the car is completely broken. So the car is no longer working. It has no more function. Its function was to get to work. So why is my function, which was able to get to work, disturbed? There's an obstacle here, which is a sign or omen that Ketu is sending to this person that there needs to be some transformation in your life. That your path as a lawyer is not the highest path that is meant for you. So in the second example, Ketu was also the one that destroyed the transmission. This time, the sign was a little more heavy because it risked the person's life. He gets to work, he takes a cab to work, he sends his car to the shop, and he tells his boss at work, boss, the transmission in my car is broken. And his boss says, well, that's weird. And then the person thinks to himself, yeah, that is kind of weird. But they're not spiritual. They only see it as an obstacle. They only see it as a challenge. They're not seeing any possibility of God or the universe sending them a spiritual message. They are only seeing this as an obstacle. So Ketu is getting angry. I would like to say that Ketu is probably getting a little bit angry. So this time, Ketu, he can't have a car. So the boss says, here, take the company car. Take the company car. I want you to have the company car since your car's not working, so you can still get to work. So 3 to 4 days later, he's taking the company car to work on let's say it's a Tuesday. And all of a sudden, he wakes up in a hospital with intravenous fluids. And he has 3 broken bones. Both his legs are broken and his rib. And he's full of intravenous fluids. And the doctor says to him that you are lucky to be alive. The third time that Ketu was the most horrific or the most painful, because Ketu offered 2 more subtle suggestions, 2 more subtle challenges, 2 more subtle obstacles, and they weren't received or noticed by the individual. So by the time the third one came, that had to risk the individual's life. Now, because he's in the hospital and he can't recover, he loses his position in the firm. And at that point, someone brings him in the Yoga Sutra, and he starts reading the Yoga Sutras. And he begins to be transformed by the Yoga Sutras. And he decides that when he gets better, he's going to move to India. And he ends up going to an ashram in India, living in India, and becoming a spiritual teacher. So even though this was very destructive for him on the material realm, eventually it led him to his full potential as a spiritual teacher. But the more and more that we see these challenges, and as I call them, signs or omens, and transform as a result, the more gentle, Ketu can really be more like an angel, always helping us transform to our highest potential. But the more that we don't see these things, the more chaos and destruction and even things connected to death can occur. Because like I mentioned, moksha is connected to death and Ketu carries that energy. So Ketu is not afraid to use the energy of death to help learn us lessons as well.
Wonderful, absolutely insightful, Kṣaṇāti.
Thank you,
As
Bettina.
Ketuvian and Ketu Dasha, I can say so. Tell me, that's a real story you were telling here,
Thank you.
right?
Yes.
Of Robin Sharma, the author?
Oh, yes. Is that a specific story? I just came up with
He was a lawyer. He was a lawyer.
Okay.
And he came very close of becoming a partner in the firm. And he was so stressed out that he ended up in the hospital with a slight heart attack, and it took him to India, far into the mountains, where he received great insights. And he spent quite an amount of time there. And when he came back, he started to lecture and write his books.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a true story.
True story. And that's a great example of the spiritual potential. And I think that's amazing. That's so amazing that that's a real story. And it has this potential to help us align to our fullest spiritual potential like that. And I've also seen it where, like, for example, my grandmother, she has a Ketu Scorpio Lagna, very strong. And she was a lawyer and during the time of lawyer, they are very financially successful. So she thought that's what she wanted to do. And then all of a sudden came this great transformation, and all of these people around from her were telling her to run for the Supreme Court. So she all of a sudden switches from being a lawyer to running for the Supreme Court. And in 1996, she was the first female justice of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, the state that I'm from. So Ketu also transformed her from a lawyer into a judge of the Supreme Court. So it has this potential to always bring us to our highest potential. And it likes to emphasize spiritual, but sometimes it can just be this higher purpose that the universe wants for us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Whichever way, yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Bettina. So I'm just going to pull up the chat here. See what. Okay, thank you. I'll look at these later. I just love seeing what everyone is saying. So oftentimes our path towards enlightenment or moksha, which we talked about earlier, is connected towards certain aspects of detachment, loss, and the concept of surrender. We can kind of understand this like similarly to how we understand the energy of the 12th house in Jyotish, is that it's indicated for liberation and moksha and all of these higher spiritual indications, but it's also connected to loss, surrender, non-attachment. So I'm talking about this. The Ketu is inherently helping us to moksha, but at the same time causing loss and detachment and loss in general, which includes the loss of our attachments and the loss of our control of life. So this concept of surrender is very strongly encouraged by Ketu as well. Now, Ketu's primary force is to encourage us to detach from aspects and areas of our lives that we are the most attached to those areas of life that we most seek to control. And it actually says in the ancient text that Ketu is connected to this karma from past lifetime. So that means that this area that Ketu is helping us work on is to detach from and not to seek control from. And this energy shows that we've been working on this karma for many, many lifetimes, and that by working on this karma, detaching from it, and not seeking to control it, this is our greatest path to moksha. So, for example, for someone with Ketu in the 7th house, their detachment from their partner, but mostly not attempting to control the marriage or how the marriage looks, is going to be their greatest path to moksha. So this area of the surrender of our attachments, the detachments from these areas of our lives that we are the most attached to, into the areas of the life that we seek to control. Now, because of the moksha karaka, Ketu works through a mechanism of erratic loss, taking away those attachments which are preventing us from liberation. So if there's anything that we are attached to, if there is anything we are attempting to control, Ketu is not afraid to just take it away, to rip it away, to remove it away. And this is very, very helpful for our path to liberation. So Ketu encourages the surrender of control by causing certain events or situations in our lives to seem completely erratic, unexplainable, and out of control. So one of the ways that Ketu encourages this surrender is by giving us no choice. Sometimes there is no choice but to surrender. And this is one of the ways that Ketu encourages us to surrender, because there will be certain events in our lives that will be unexplainable, unpredictable, and that we have no control of. And the only thing that we can do is to surrender. And that when we do surrender, this is highly beneficial for our path towards moksha. Now, sometimes there are certain obstacles in our lives that prevent us from an ideal connection with the divine, from an ideal connection with God, bringing us further away from our path towards moksha and liberation from the ego and body. Ketu will place many spiritual obstacles in front of a soul's path in order to realign them with their highest spiritual frequency and proper path towards enlightenment. So in the ancient texts, Ketu is referred to as the presenter of obstacles because it presents profound spiritual obstacles. When we conquer and move through these obstacles, Ketu realigns us with our spiritual truth and our path towards moksha. It's kind of like a rebirth, a death of one aspect of yourself and the rebirth of the highest aspect of yourself. And so Ketu is a divine reorganizer and reconnector to our highest spiritual truth and path towards enlightenment. Now, I kind of explain this through the situation, but Ketu offers profound obstacles, chaos, difficulties, destruction, and challenges and loss to those natives who have a problematic relationship or karma with Ketu. So basically, it shows it's important to improve the karma with Ketu when we're experiencing Ketu karma as obstacle, chaos, difficulty, destruction, challenge, and loss. This shows that we have now we all are human being, and we all are living in the Kali Yuga, and we all have some attachment to our ego. We all are afraid to die. We all are afraid, but Ketu is helping us with these energies. So to those natives that are disconnected from their higher purpose or spiritual potential, like I mentioned, they may run away from it. Ketu presents these horrible obstacles and destruction, could be very malefic. In this sense, Ketu acts demonically, destroying the potential growth of the ego and our attachments because we are unable to see the teachings. So Ketu will destroy our ego whether we see the lesson or not. But it will be a much more demonic experience or much more malefic experience if we do not see the teachings or lessons. The destructive manifestation of Ketu is deeply connected to the inability to see the omens, signs, and signals that Ketu presents in the native's life. Ketu is a tail with no head. Ketu has no head. Ketu has no eyes. So the greatest difficulty that we face with Ketu is the blindness, the inability to see these omens, signs, and signals that Ketu presents in our lives. This is how the most difficult karma with Ketu manifests when we are blind, like Ketu has no head, when we are blind to these signals, signs, and omens. Now, So yeah, Ketu offers rewards, visions, epiphanies, magical or transformative experiences, healing experience, momentary experiences of moksha, which means enlightenment before death, to those natives which have a positive relationship or karma with Ketu. So I have to present both sides of Ketu, the side of Ketu that acts like an angel and the side of Ketu that will act like a demon. But the Ketu will offer profound reward, vision, epiphanies, magic, healing, and enlightenment here on earth to those that have a positive relationship or karma with Ketu and are deeply aligned to their full potential spiritually or higher purpose consistently throughout their lifetime. So there's also a great amount of potential that if we're constantly focused towards moksha, the Ketu will help us get there and experience it even before we leave this physical body. And again, I think we all become enlightened when we leave our body, but this potential to experience this liberation while still in this body, well, I can't imagine it, but I know that it's possible. So in the most profound sense, Ketu also offers the ultimate emancipation, liberation, and contentedness, because Ketu karma is to remove our ego and attachments, which are the root of all suffering. Desire is the root of all suffering. Attachments is the root of all suffering. Ego, these are all the roots, the real origin of suffering is our attachments, ego, and desires. So in the most profound sense, Ketu helps us remove that which is the root of all suffering, our attachments and our ego. Now, Ketu is mentioned as the presenter of obstacles. So I want to talk about a certain karmic relationship, and I believe in a celestial hierarchy. Now, this could be symbolic, metaphoric, metaphysical. I don't really understand how it works up there, but this is a nice way to understand the relationship between Ketu and Ganesh. Now, as Ketu is the presenter of obstacles, while Ganesh is said to be the remover of obstacles. So they work intimately together in the celestial realm, or as I like to call it, heaven, to both present and remove obstacles. And remember, Ketu is the only planet whose direction is upward, is towards heaven. And it has a particularly close connection to Ganesh. When you work with improving your relationship and karma with Ketu, you are also similarly working on improving your karma and Ketu with Ganesh. They have a brother-sibling relationship, as I like to understand it. Both of these forces come from the same divine source. Everything comes from one. And these forces work together to help humanity in their spiritual evolution through presenting obstacles, omens, and signs, as well as removing those obstacles when we see or recognize the omen, sign, or the message or lesson that is being presented. So we can understand this. The Ketu and Ganesh can be considered great friends who work with each other in the deepest sense, in which Ketu does not present or give an obstacle that Ganesh does not approve spiritually. And Ganesh does not remove the obstacle until Ketu approves the native to be ready for that obstacle to be removed. So this relationship I want to present as a profound heavenly celestial relationship between Ganesh and Ketu, truly mystical and divine, and I explain it as a metaphor, but I feel this metaphor as a understanding in my heart, but it is easiest explained through metaphor, that like Ketu and Ganesh, they are like brothers working together in heaven to both present and remove obstacles that are necessary for our spiritual evolution. So that's the initial introduction into how to understand the Ketu's karma without understanding its position or dignity, but just understanding Ketu in general. And I hope this has been beneficial and supportive for everyone in understanding all of the amazing qualities that Ketu has to offer, and truly what those more difficult qualities, what they are offering that is positive, really. So I hope my intention was to present a slightly more favorable opinion of Ketu, then I see that as generalized perceived through Jyotish. I believe Ketu to be more benefic than we truly understand, but that benefic is spiritual. Now, Ketu entered the Saturn-owned sign of Aquarius on January 30th of last year, and it will remain in Aquarius until August 18th of this year, until the late summer. Now, Aquarius and its relationship to Saturn bodes well for Ketu, as Ketu is counted amongst Saturn's friends and has a powerful auspicious energy in its alignment with Aquarius. Now, again, I'm going to use this word auspicious a lot, and sometimes auspicious does not mean here favorable on the material realm. It means favorable in terms of our spiritual liberation and our path to moksha. So again, this auspicious energy is our ability to achieve our highest soul's potential. Now, Ketu's alignment with Aquarius is highly potent and will encourage rapid and unpredictable spiritual transformation. Ketu is the force of the universe which is constantly aligning us to our highest spiritual frequency. And when it's traveling in Aquarius, which focuses on progressive consciousness, innovation, and alignment towards idealism and optimism, this shift will cause Ketu to embody and empower Aquarius-type vibrations, because Ketu and Rahu are heavily influenced by the planets and signs which they are with, and even the nakshatras. And that I believe the nakshatras to have more influence on Ketu and Rahu than they do on the planets. But this is just personal as I come to understand more. But through Aquarius, Ketu is working to align our individual consciousness with that of the universal consciousness in a very potent spiritual way. This vibration means that Ketu in Aquarius is encouraging more unity and harmony in consciousness in certain types of groups and frequencies that are aligning. This means progressive consciousness ideals will be aligning, and those groups will be expanding in their expression. This particular concept could be seen playing out in the presidential election in the USA. This was very interesting, in which a very powerful but very idealistic Republican conservative consciousness aligned around Donald Trump. And at the same time, this was also a very unique, ideal, liberal democratic consciousness aligning around the candidate Bernie Sanders. And this was when Ketu first went into Aquarius. So the Ketu in Aquarius, it showed the alignment around Donald Trump because he is ideal in his conservative beliefs. And it also showed the alignment around Bernie Sanders because he is ideal in his liberal beliefs. It shows a lot of alignment around those energies which are idealistic. And this is hinting at a powerful energy reorienting Ketu with the optimistic, ideal, and consciousness-provoking energies of Aquarius. Another one of these extremely potent karmas that comes out of the current combination of Ketu and Aquarius is there a powerful reorientation towards idealism and optimism, especially as it applies to our spiritual path and our journey towards moksha. Now, our path to moksha is not ideal. There's nothing ideal about the spiritual path. It never turns out the way we thought it would. So this could be a more challenging aspect. This means, but the positive aspect is that those that have strayed away from optimism and idealism, strayed away from viewing the glass as half full, which means they look at the glass as half empty, strayed away from believing in the potential of that ideal. And so Ketu and Aquarius are working together to align us with the optimism and idealism again. So for those that have forgotten the aspect of themselves, which has some idealistic, some optimistic energy, the Ketu in Aquarius is helping align this vibration. So it may reawaken the idealistic energy within inside of you. And those that have Ketu in Aquarius are very idealistic individuals. This will only encourage us to see the optimism and idealism in all the areas of life, but to transform and align with that optimism and ideal. We will be able to transform in our lives, to transform and align our lives with our new evolving progressive consciousness. So whichever consciousness our consciousness is aligning to, we will be able to transform and align ourselves with that consciousness. Whether personally, I was a love of Bernie Sanders, and I still follow him, and his speeches and everything. So that is the ideal that I connect to. Everyone has an ideal that they will connect to, and there is some transformation during this time to that ideal aspect of yourself.
Well put it.
One of the things that Ketu would be known to do during this period is place certain obstacles, let's bring the obstacles of Ketu, in our pattern or areas in our life that are preventing us from reaching our ideal expression or our ideal alignment with our consciousness, with the universal consciousness. So whatever obstacles there are to consciousness evolution, whatever obstacles there are to pessimism, like if someone is pessimistic, not seeing ideal or optimistic, then Ketu will prevent powerful obstacles during this time to help us align with our path to moksha as relates to this ideal consciousness and to the ideals that we're believing in and striving for. So Ketu will cause a great amount of transformation to this. So this is a time of ideal transformation towards ideal expressions in our individual lives, which is, again, this is hard to talk about because life is not ideal, but there are times in life where we strive for ideal. You know, just because life is not ideal doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for the ideal. Doesn't mean the ideal isn't something that we should go for. Maybe that life can be bitter and pessimistic and cynical, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be optimistic. But this is coming from an Aquarius lugna. So obviously I feel these ways in my heart as well. This is a time of ideal transformation and our path towards moksha, as well as transformation to what is truly ideal for our path towards liberation. So this transformation of our consciousness, it may be particularly beneficial to moksha. So how our consciousness grows at this time, while Aquarius and Ketu are together, may be very powerful for our path to moksha. Of course, it depends on where Aquarius is in everyone's chart. But this is a generalized energy. And our path, both in terms of preparation for transformation when our soul leaves the body. So this time period is preparing our consciousness for death, but it is also our preparing our consciousness to experience samadhi or nirvana while still in this physical form. But this evolution of the consciousness has to take place. The divine Aquarius Ketu vibration is encouraging ideal transformation, both in the subjective, objective, and collective sense. And when we honor this ideal transformation and continue to honor that vibration, it is very helpful in our alignment to moksha.
Kṣaṇāti?
Yes.
Just a small question from my side. So over the longer run, can we say that Ketu is interested to rise our frequency?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. And that is why I like Ketu. And I think Aquarius is like this too.
So, okay.
Yeah. So I think it's an auspicious alignment, especially for the raising of our frequency of our consciousness. Now, that frequency can be not, so the alignment can be a very positive high frequency, but you could also align around a lower frequency. Like how I mentioned, there's alignment around Donald Trump. And I don't mean to get into politics, but it's a very tamasic frequency. So this energy, this alignment, it's an alignment of our consciousness. And whether our consciousness is tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic, liberal or conservative, it will align with the greater frequency in those ways as well.
Step by step, no?
Yeah.
Please continue.
So now we will get into the more controversial aspect. I know controversial isn't the right word, but Ketu and planetary dignity. And I am approaching Ketu and planetary dignity completely different for Ketu than I did for Saturn. I believe Saturn's planetary dignity to be very easy to understand, and Ketu's planetary dignity to be impossible to understand. So we are going to attempt to understand this. But again, this come from a lot of research and my own understanding of how to understand Ketu and its planetary dignity. But it is so complicated that it can't be understood simply as exaltation, debilitation, and things like that we understand with the other planets. Because of its inherently, for us to understand its auspicious, inauspicious, benefic, malefic vibrations, it's important to understand the dignity. So we're going to get into this area, and again, there are many different opinions about that, and I honor and respect all these different opinions in terms of Ketu and its planetary dignity. Ketu and Rahu vary greatly in the astrological opinion of their natural sign, exaltation, and debilitation signs. Therefore, in some respect, it is considered a controversial area of discussion since many different astrologers and lineages have different opinions amongst the matter. It is worth mentioning that some Jyotish, some forms and lineages of astrology believe that Ketu and Rahu to be beyond planetary dignity. That means that they are beyond exaltation, debilitation, and natural sign. Nadi astrology and other forms of astrology believe that Ketu to be beyond planetary dignity, and I want to honor that. And when I first started doing this research, because I come from Parashara lineage, I was educated in a lineage of Parashara, which has its own opinion on the exaltation, debilitation, and natural sign of Ketu and Rahu. But I want to honor those that also believe that Ketu and Rahu to be beyond that. And even though I honor Parashara as my lineage, I will also delineate slightly from Parashara's opinions because my research led me that way. The opinion on the dignity and aspect of Ketu comes from the lineage I've studied, which I mentioned, Parashara, and my personal feelings and beliefs along the subject. I got many different opinions, and I really spent a lot of time meditating and doing research to present this. Other opinions on Ketu's dignity may vary, and I want you to know, as I mentioned, that I truly honor and respect those opinions as well. Now, generally, Ketu Karma helps us transform and align to our highest potential in whichever area or aim of life it influences in the chart. And Ketu favors and prioritizes moksha aim above all other aims. It's the moksha karaka or moksha significator. So it helps us align to our highest potential in whichever area of the chart it is, but it prioritizes moksha no matter what. The position and dignity of Ketu influences greatly both the benefic or malefic nature of that transformation. That means that the position and dignity of Ketu depends whether the transformation that Ketu takes you through is going to be easy or hard. And the potential karmic outcome energetically of our highest frequency of being aligned to. So it influences whether the journey of transformation is easy or hard and how easy or hard it is. And it also influences the outcome of that transformation, the potential outcome of that transformation. Sometimes that transformation of that outcome could mean that you're a better person, and other times the transformation of that outcome could make you the president of your country. So again, the dignity and the auspiciousness of Ketu also influences the karmic outcome. Ketu will always favor to bring us to moksha in its pure energy. But Ketu always takes on the aspects of planets conjunct or related to it, the signs that it's in. So even the primary karma of Ketu, which is moksha, can be altered depending on the planetary dignity, conjunction, and placement of Ketu. So you will see as we go through these examples that Ketu will always honor and emphasize moksha, but that sometimes can delineate slightly from this as its only indication. Okay, very excited too. So I believe Ketu's natural sign to be Scorpio, due to Ketu's ancient comparison towards Mars and Scorpio's vibrational energy. Both Scorpio and Ketu have indications for transformation and rebirth. They also resonate as profoundly curious energies and seeking/investigative energies, and are akin to each other in the most profound sense. One might even say that Scorpio is co-ruled by both Mars and Ketu. So some Jyotisha believe Scorpio to be dually ruled, both by Mars and by Scorpio. Now, Ketu is extremely strong in Scorpio, and therefore indicates an incredible amount of power, intensity, pitta, and transformation in whichever area of life it carries its influence. My lineage, Sri Maharishi Parashara, Om Namah Shivaya, considers Scorpio the exaltation sign of Ketu. So Parashara considers Scorpio to be, Ketu to be exalted in Scorpio. While my understanding, while I honor that, is much more understanding it to a similar or akin to Scorpio, and therefore resonating for me as an own sign or natural sign vibration. I don't think there is any sign that is more like Ketu than Scorpio. Now, depending on the house position of Ketu in Scorpio, it can be incredibly helpful for reaching incredibly high positions within society and government, and establishing powerful dharmic roles within society, especially when Ketu is in the Lagna or the 10th house. Like my grandmother is Ketu Scorpio Lagna, and she became a justice of Supreme Court. So again, that was one of the energies that helped her. It is also has a profound potential to help us achieve moksha, liberate, and align to our greatest spiritual potential. And I like to say that Ketu will emphasize that. It can even help us glimpse moksha or enlightenment while still in the human body, while still in the physical form, as well as the highest form as transcendence at the time of moksha, or samadhi at the time of moksha. And I like to, like I mentioned, the 9th and the 12th house are significations for this more spiritual vibration of Ketu. Now, when Ketu is within the Rashi, Sagittarius, and Pisces, it is considered auspicious. This is due to Ketu's relationship with Jupiter. Now, I believe Ketu is most auspicious in Sagittarius when it is in Ketu-ruled Mula Nakshatra, which is just the first 13 degrees of Sagittarius. Potentially, this alignment of Ketu in Mula Nakshatra could be considered a sign of exaltation. So again, I will present my opinion here, is that Ketu, in some sense, is beyond exaltation and debilitation. I do kind of feel this way. But when Ketu is in its own nakshatra, I believe that can be considered an exaltation because it is extremely powerful and has extremely powerful significations. So my understanding of Ketu and its exaltations is when it is posited in its own nakshatra. Ketu is most auspicious in Pisces in Ketu-ruled Revati Nakshatra. Potentially, this alignment of Ketu in Revati Nakshatra could also be considered an exaltation of Ketu, or a most auspicious or beneficial alignment. Now, the lineage of Parashara, Sri Maharishi Parashara, considers Pisces to be the natural sign of Ketu, or to be the own sign of Ketu. So I want to emphasize that there is a strong amount of resonance between Ketu and Pisces. But I cannot consider Ketu to be the natural sign of Pisces because of Ketu being so much fire, so much pitta, that I do consider there to be an auspicious alignment when Ketu is in Pisces, but it's not to be its natural sign. Now, Ketu is very mystical and spiritual in Pisces, and it's akin to spiritual, mystical, and moksha-related transformation. And that is why Parashara considers Pisces to be the natural sign of Ketu. Pisces has a moksha signification, and Ketu has a signification. So these combinations is auspicious, especially for the mystical or spiritual. Now, Ketu holds auspiciousness in Sagittarius and can indicate profound transformation to the highest version of ourselves from an ethical, moral, humanitarian, and justice-oriented perspective. So I like to say that Ketu holds auspiciousness in Sagittarius, especially into the transformation to the highest version of ourselves in terms of the moral and ethical aspect.
Okay, great. Kṣaṇāti, just a little error, I believe. Did you mean Purva Bhatta Bhatta? Because Revati is ruled by Mercury.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I did.
Okay, so there's a little error. So it should be Purva Bhatta Bhatta.
Yes. I actually think I mentioned that. I don't know. Must be a small typo there. Now, when Ketu is within the Rashi Taurus, it is considered particularly malefic and inauspicious. This is because Taurus is a sign of wealth, stability, and security. And Ketu has many significations and qualities that oppose this, such as unpredictability, chaos, change, and loss. Sri Maharishi Parashara considers Taurus to be the debilitation sign of Ketu. So from a very ancient perspective, there is a very inauspicious energy when Ketu goes into Taurus. Now, I find Ketu to be most debilitated in the Kṛtika Nakshatra and the Rohini Nakshatra because of Ketu's enemy relationship with the sun and the moon. Ketu is said to have the most malefic or negative relationship with the sun and the moon. So when Taurus, it's particularly difficult when Ketu is in Kṛtika Nakshatra or Rohini Nakshatra. Now, Ketu becomes more auspicious. And I've even heard certain perceptions that Ketu can be exalted in Taurus. Now, this is an opposite kind of energy from how I want to mainly focus Ketu's energy in Taurus. But in the last 7 degrees of Taurus, 23 to 30 degrees, Mars is Mrigashira Nakshatra, which is also called Amrita Nakshatra, which is ruled by the planet Mars. Because of this energy, this nakshatra has special indications for living a spiritual life and taking a spiritual path towards liberation. So even though Mars is very troubled in Taurus, I believe it to be much more auspicious if it's in Mrigashira Nakshatra.
And Ketu.
Yes.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, makes sense.
When Ketu is within the Mercury-ruled Rashis Gemini and Virgo, it is considered a mixed effect and carries both auspicious and inauspicious effects. Some even consider Ketu to be debilitated in Gemini. Ketu is known to have a neutral planetary relationship with Mercury, which is why generally Ketu in Mercury ruled signs has a mixed effect. It will not be purely auspicious and it will not be purely inauspicious. Now, when Ketu is in a Mercury ruled sign, it causes Ketu to influence the native's buddhi. Buddhi is the discretionary factor of our consciousness. This brings inherent challenges to the integrating magic and logic and brings moksha significations into the native's logical mind. In other words, the natives are forced to surrender their logical or rational thoughts and understanding about certain aspects of life for the unpredictable, magical, transformative, illogical Ketu. So for those that have Ketu and Mercury ruled sign, they really have to surrender their logical, intellectual understanding of things for the magical healing or transformative aspects of things. And this can be challenging. This is a challenge vibration to combine magic and logic.
I read with Bipin Behari. He states that this placement particularly makes a person too practical oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And this practicality stands in between somehow, no?
Yeah, and that makes sense too, because ideally one's logical and one's mystical or magical or spiritual come into balance here, but that will be very challenging. Usually, I would imagine that the logical would be favored here, and that the signs and omens may be ignored and not believed in because they are not logical at all. There's nothing there. There's no way to logically understand an omen. There's no way to intellectually understand an omen. So it can be a challenge in karma. But again, to the piece of the logic and the magic energy there. Now,
many authors in this regard stress that it depends upon the evolution of the soul also. Mm-hmm. So there are different layers, we can say, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Where people may appease for logic, but
exactly.
They have a sense or a door open, you can say, and have space for another thing as well, you know, and integrated it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, within Gemini Rashi, Ketu is most auspicious, because I like to focus on the positives, in Mrigashira Nakshatra. And has very unique mystical and transformative indications in the Rahu-ruled Ardra Nakshatra. Now, when Ketu is in a Rahu Nakshatra, that is not going to be easy, but it has very profound energies for spiritual transformation. Most auspicious or comfortable in the Mrigashira Nakshatra, but also mystically powerful in the Ardha Nakshatra. Now, within Virgo, I believe Ketu to be most auspicious within Chitra Nakshatra, which is the last 7 degrees of the Virgo Nakshatra. This conjunction can aid greatly in experiencing the divine beauty of life, both on material and spiritual. So, as I mentioned, the difficulty of combining the logical and the magical. Well, something about when Ketu is in Chitra Nakshatra, that energy of the combination of those things becomes a much more auspicious vibration. Now, within Virgo, Ketu is particularly inauspicious in Uttar Palguni and Hasta Nakshatra. Again, Ketu has a very difficult relationship with the sun and the moon, so can be very challenging in those nakshatras, Uttar Palguni and Hasta. I normally don't discuss this much about nakshatras, but like I had mentioned, when I began to really dive into this topic, it seems the nakshatras with the nodes have a very important relationship. So when Ketu is within Aries, it is considered particularly strong, very, very strong energy. Again, one could even consider it a natural sign or own sign, but Aries doesn't have as strong of a spiritual vibration as Ketu, but because of this relationship of Ketu and Mars, it's a very powerful Pitta, 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 Pitta combination. One could consider this alignment to be a planetary friendship, but I mentioned here it is incredibly hot and Pitta aggravating, and so is Ketu in Scorpio. This Ketu in the Pitta-ruled signs, very difficult for Pitta in the constitution and Pitta in the body and Pitta aggravation throughout one's life. So I believe that it will offer a mixed aspect, auspicious in allowing this great passion and intensity in one's actions, but inauspicious because this alignment can cause radical, extreme, violent, or aggressive energy. It can show someone who naturally deals with Pitta issues. And again, one of these aspects of Pitta includes anger, violence, and sometimes this combination of Ketu in a Mars-ruled sign can show even military aspects to the individual. Now, Ketu is by far the most auspicious and powerful in Ashwini Nakshatra within Aries, and has powerful indications when in Ashwini Nakshatra for magic, mysticism, and medicine or healing. The Ashwin twins are within the lineage that founded Ayurveda. So when Ketu falls in Ashwini, it shows that you can be a healer. Now, this also shows that you might have to suffer certain health difficulties in your own life in order to find your path as a healer. But I believe Ketu to be very auspicious in the Ashwini Nakshatra because of its potential for healing, medicine, miracles, and magic. And I would even say that you could consider Ketu exalted in Ashwini. Now, I'm talking about 5 or 6 nakshatras that you can consider Ketu to have auspicious energy in. That's what I consider when I say Ketu can be considered exalted here, is that Ketu can be considered very auspicious in the Ashwini Nakshatra. Now, when Ketu is in Aries and in Kritika Nakshatra, this is horribly disturbing to the Pitta dosha and usually very, very, very challenging to the individual's health. When Ketu falls into Kritika Nakshatra, it can be very difficult and challenging for one's Pitta dosha in their body and one's health. And that I consider an inauspicious, more challenging alignment where Pitta always has to be kept in balance. Now, when Ketu is within Libra, it presents a mixed effect, similar to the mixed effect of Mercury. But many Jyotisha, actually in my research, and I had found this in my in how I had learned, that Ketu and Libra's ruler Venus to have a planetary friendship. So some astrologers consider Ketu to be friends with Mars, Venus, and Saturn. And this energy of this planetary friendship does present some auspicious energies, but it will be a mixed effect. It is not the most auspicious, but it is potentially very auspicious for the more spiritual aspects, but could be challenging, as I mentioned, on the material physical realm. Now, Ketu is auspicious in the Chitra Nakshatra and has very powerful mystical and spiritual indications in the Rahu-ruled Swati Nakshatra as well, that allows for profound spiritual transformation. Now again, Ketu in the Rahu Nakshatra is going to be very challenging on the material realm, causing great amount of transformation. I think the path will be the most rewarding when Ketu falls in the Chitra Nakshatra. Now, Libra is a Rashi that wishes to achieve balance, harmony, and peace with all things in the universe. Ketu makes this achievement of harmony and balance with the universe extremely challenging because the constant unpredictable change and transformation that Ketu brings. So you have to find balance and harmony with chaos. You have to find balance and harmony with unpredictability. And this is inherently a challenging vibration. So this ultimately leads us to experience life. This ultimately leads us to experience duality, the duality of life, which means good and bad, positive, negative, pleasure, pain, happiness, and sadness. It has this strong indication when Ketu is in Libra for us having these really dualistic extreme experiences. But the spiritual path of Ketu in Libra is to go beyond the duality, the path of non-duality. And this is connected to the branch of the Vedas called Vedanta philosophy. So those with Ketu and Libra have to experience the duality of the universe. And sometimes that duality can be very challenging on the material realm in the process of the transformation. But eventually it leads them to experiencing a certain form of liberation that is beyond duality. So there is this potential to go beyond pleasure and pain, to go beyond happiness and sadness, to go beyond the duality. And again, this is connected to the Vedanta philosophy. And I just encourage those with Ketu in Taurus and Ketu in Libra, the Vedanta philosophy, to be very beneficial. Non-duality.
Brilliant. Wonderful.
When Ketu is within the Rashis Capricorn and Aquarius, and we've already talked a little bit about Aquarius, just going to go over it a little again. It's considered powerful energy. Saturn and Ketu are considered amongst friends in the planetary relationship, but they are always working together for the greatest amount of growth spiritually. But both planets are similar in that they are not necessarily concerned with the benefic nature of your physical experience of life. So Ketu and Saturn also can be compared to each other because they care about your spiritual growth above everything else. Now, when Ketu is in Capricorn, it causes great unpredictable transformation through challenges, obstacles, and adversity in one's life. Capricorn is this sign of adversity. This conjunction can be very challenging on the material realm. Ketu is less auspicious in Capricorn when it is in Uttarashada Nakshatra or Shravana Nakshatra. Again, Ketu has a very difficult relationship with the sun and the moon. Now, Dhanista Nakshatra, I believe Ketu to have a slightly more auspicious relationship with. Again, so even within the Capricorn, more challenging in Shravana and Uttarashada than it is in Dhanista. Now, when Ketu is in Aquarius, as we mentioned, it causes profound, unpredictable transformation of the native's consciousness. Ketu is constantly advancing those with Ketu in Aquarius to new paradigms of thinking, alternative forms of consciousness, and spiritual innovation. Ketu is favorable in the Dhanista Nakshatra, as I mentioned, which is in the end of Capricorn and the beginning of Aquarius. And it is particularly magical or mystical in the Rahu-ruled Saptarishis Nakshatra. This is also similar to Rohini, similar to Ashwini, but has a more Rahu-type nature to it. But this is a very mystical indication here and also shows the path of the healer. Just like Ketu in Ashwini, Ketu in Saptarishis also shows the path of the healer.
It's called 100 healers, no?
Yes, yes. The garland of 100 flowers, I like too. And that is actually my Lagna Nakshatra.
I was supposing.
Yeah. So that is my, I guess, ruling nakshatra, one could say. Now, when Ketu is within the Rashi Cancer, it creates a particularly challenging and malefic effect. Sometimes I consider this to be more debilitated than Taurus. This is due to Ketu's extremely challenging and troubling relationship with the moon. Ketu moon, very, very challenging. And Ketu and the moon are most definitely enemy energies to each other. Cancer is the sign of the feeling and the emotion, and Ketu's influence on this Rashi causes great amount of distress on the mental and emotional plane. This is when Ketu is in Cancer or when Ketu is conjunct with the moon. It causes a great amount of distress on the mental and emotional plane. Now, Ketu's placement in Cancer, while it does cause much distress on the mental and emotional, can also help with profound mental and emotional transformation. So it can be very helpful for the transformation of our emotional self, but horribly challenging in that process. And I have a particular amount of sympathy and compassion to those natives with Ketu in Cancer. Now, Ketu functions most benefic in the Purnarvasu Nakshatra. So even when Ketu is in in Cancer. It can do slightly better in the Purnarvasu Nakshatra. This encourages a lot of success and growth in one's lifetime. No matter what, will still cause challenges on the mental and the emotional, but can be very productive with the overcoming of that transformation. Now, Ketu also has a mystical vibration that supports moksha in Ashlesha Nakshatra, because one of the karmas of Ashlesha Nakshatra is to remove obstacles in one's life. That is Ketu's bhava, which is to remove obstacles, to present obstacles in one's life. So this is conjunction, while very challenging on the physical realm, can very powerful on the spiritual realm as well. Very powerful on the spiritual realm.
Yeah, moon is a nurturer, no? So here we have two opposites working together. I think this makes it so challenging and difficult to bear. Yeah, moon wants to be nurtured or nurtures. Ketu wants opposite.